The wind howled like 1,000 screaming demons as Josephine Zimmerman pressed her infant daughter against her chest, stumbling through the blinding whiteness that had swallowed the world whole. She had been 3 days on the trail from Kansas City to meet her sister in Texas when the December storm descended without warning, separating her from the wagon train and leaving her alone with nothing but the clothes on her back and a baby who had not stopped crying since the cold settled into their bones. Her husband had died of fever 6 months earlier, leaving her with nothing but debts and a child on the way. The baby, Clara, was only 4 months old now, wrapped in every shred of fabric Josephine could spare, but still the cold found ways to creep in. Josephine's fingers had gone numb an hour ago, maybe 2. Time had lost all meaning in the whiteout. She could barely see 5 feet ahead, and every direction looked the same. The landscape of northeastern Oklahoma had been gently rolling prairie when she last saw it clearly, but now it was an endless blur of snow and wind. Her feet caught on something beneath the drifts, and she fell hard, twisting her body at the last second to protect Clara from the impact. The baby's cries intensified, thin and ready, and Josephine felt tears freeze on her cheeks as she struggled to her feet again. How much longer could she keep going? How much longer before the cold claimed them both? It was Christmas Eve, 1881. Somewhere, families were gathering around warm fires, singing carols, sharing meals. Josephine had been hoping to reach her sister's homestead before the holiday, to give Clara her first Christmas surrounded by love and safety. Instead, they were dying in the wilderness, and no one would ever know what became of them. She took another step, then another. The wind pushed against her like a physical wall, trying to drive her backward. She had no idea if she was even traveling in a straight line anymore. For all she knew, she was walking in circles, using up her last reserves of strength to go nowhere at all. The ground suddenly dropped away beneath her feet. She tumbled down a steep embankment, clutching Clara desperately as they rolled through the snow. They came to rest at the bottom of a ravine, and Josephine lay there for a long moment, checking frantically to make sure the baby was still breathing. Clara's cries had weakened to soft whimpers, which frightened Josephine more than the screaming had. She forced herself to sit up, looking around. The ravine provided some shelter from the worst of the wind, but the cold was still brutal. She crawled to where the embankment offered a slight overhang, creating a tiny pocket of space. It was not much, but it was something. She settled herself into the depression, wrapping her body around Clara, and began to pray. She must have dozed, because she woke to the sound of hoofbeats. At first she thought she was dreaming or hallucinating, but the sound grew louder, accompanied by a man's voice calling out. She tried to respond, but her throat was too raw from the cold and wind. She managed only a croak. The hoofbeats stopped. "Hello," the voice called again, closer now. "Someone down there." Josephine forced herself to take a deeper breath and tried again. "Here, please, we are here." A dark shape appeared at the top of the embankment, barely visible through the swirling snow. "Hold on. I am coming down." The figure descended in a controlled slide, and then a man was kneeling beside her. He was bundled in a thick coat and had a scarf wrapped around his face, but she could see his eyes, dark and concerned. "Madam, are you hurt? Lord have mercy, is that a baby, please?" Josephine whispered. "Help us. So cold." The man did not waste time with more questions. He shrugged out of his coat and wrapped it around both of them, then carefully lifted Josephine in his arms. She was not a small woman, but he carried her as though she weighed nothing. "My horse is just up top. We need to get you somewhere warm. My ranch is about 2 miles east. Can you hold on?" Josephine nodded against his chest. He smelled of leather and wood smoke and horse, solid and real and alive. He climbed back up the embankment with sure footing despite his burden, and then he was settling her onto a large bay horse and swinging up behind her. He wrapped his arms around both her and the baby, holding the reins with one hand while the other kept them secure against him. "My name is Lucas Quinn," he said as the horse began moving through the storm. "I have been out looking for strays that wandered off when the storm hit. Lucky thing I came this way. What is your name, madam?" "Josephine Zimmerman," she managed through chattering teeth. "This is Clara, my daughter. You are going to be all right now, Mrs. Zimmerman, both of you. Just hold on a little longer." The ride felt endless, but it could not have been more than 20 minutes before shapes emerged from the snow. A barn, a corral, a house. Lucas guided the horse straight to the barn, dismounting and lifting Josephine down before leading them through a side door that connected directly to the house. The warmth hit like a physical blow. Josephine gasped, and Clara's whimpers grew stronger. Lucas set them down on a sofa near a large fireplace where logs crackled and popped. He lit several oil lamps, bringing the room into clearer focus. It was a simple but well-kept space, furnished with obvious care. "Let me get some blankets," Lucas said, unwrapping the scarf from his face. Josephine got her first clear look at him. He was perhaps in his late 20s, with dark hair that fell across his forehead, a strong jaw shadowed with stubble, and those deep brown eyes that seemed to hold both kindness and something sad. He disappeared into another room and returned with an armful of quilts. "We need to warm you slowly," he said, wrapping the blankets around them. "Too fast can be dangerous. Are you able to feed the baby?" Josephine looked down at Clara, whose little face was red from crying and cold. "I think so. I have been trying, but she has been so upset." "Try now while we get you warm. I will make some broth for you. When did you last eat?" "Yesterday morning, maybe the morning before, I am not sure." Lucas's jaw tightened, but he only nodded. "I will be quick." He moved to the kitchen area, which was separated from the main room by a simple counter. Josephine opened her dress with numb, fumbling fingers and encouraged Clara to nurse. The baby latched on weakly at first, then with more vigor as she warmed. Josephine felt tears of relief sliding down her cheeks. She took the opportunity to study her rescuer more closely. He moved through the kitchen with easy competence, building up the fire in the stove, setting a pot to heat. He was tall and lean, with the weathered look of a man who spent most of his time outdoors. His clothes were simple but well made, and the house, though modest, showed evidence of prosperity. This was not a dirt-floor homestead but an established ranch. "How did you come to be out in the storm with a baby?" Lucas asked, glancing over at her as he stirred something in the pot. Josephine swallowed. "I was traveling from Kansas City to Texas. My sister has a homestead near Austin, and she invited me to come live with her after my husband died. We were with a wagon train, but when the storm hit, everything became confused. My wagon wheel broke, and the driver said he would help me, but then I could not find him or any of the others. I tried to wait it out, but the cold was so terrible. I thought if I walked, I might find shelter or catch up to the others. I was wrong." "The storm came up fast," Lucas said. "Even experienced travelers got caught off guard. A wagon train probably pressed on, hoping to reach Muskogee before the worst hit." Muskogee is about 15 miles southwest of here. They might have made it, or they might have sheltered somewhere along the way. "Is Muskogee a large town?" Josephine asked. "Fair-sized. It is in Indian territory, so there is a mix of everyone. Creek Indians, white settlers, freedmen, traders. It has a telegraph office, though. Once the storm clears, we can send word that you are safe. Your sister will be worried. I do not know if the wagon train master took down her information. Everything happened so quickly." Josephine felt fresh despair rising. She will not know what became of me. We will figure it out, Lucas said firmly. He poured broth into a cup and brought it over to her. Drink this slowly. Your stomach may not take kindly to food after going without. Josephine accepted the cup gratefully. The broth was simple, just beef and vegetables, but it tasted like the finest meal she had ever eaten. The warmth spread through her chest and belly, and she felt the terrible bone deep cold finally beginning to recede. Clara had fallen asleep at her breast, her little face finally peaceful. Josephine adjusted the baby carefully, covering herself again. "Thank you," she said to Lucas. "You saved our lives. I do not know how to repay such a debt." "No debt," Lucas said, settling into a chair across from her. "Any decent person would have done the same. You are safe now." That is what matters. The wind continued to howl outside, rattling the windows. Lucas stood and checked the doors, making sure they were secure, then added more wood to the fire. "Storm shows no sign of letting up. You will need to stay here until it clears. I have a spare bedroom you can use. It is not fancy, but it has a good bed and plenty of blankets." "I do not want to impose," Josephine began, but Lucas cut her off. "Mrs. Zimmerman, you have a baby and you nearly froze to death. You are in no condition to go anywhere, and even if you were, there is nowhere to go in this weather. You will stay here and we will not speak of imposing. Understood?" There was such authority in his voice that Josephine found herself nodding. "Thank you, Mr. Quinn." "Lucas," he said, "we are not formal out here. Can you walk, or shall I carry you to the bedroom?" Josephine tried to stand and found her legs shaking. Lucas was beside her in an instant, supporting her with one hand while she held Clara. He guided her through a doorway into a small bedroom that held a large bed, a dresser, and a rocking chair. The room was cold, but Lucas quickly lit a fire in the small stove in the corner. "I will bring more blankets and some warmed stones to put under the covers," he said. "Do you need anything else? Diapers for the baby?" Josephine felt her cheeks heat. "I have some in my bag, but I lost the bag when I fell into the ravine. I will go back and look for it when the storm clears. In the meantime, we can make do with some clean cloth. I have plenty." He was true to his word, returning with an armful of supplies. Josephine changed Clara's diaper, grateful beyond words for the dry cloth and the warm room. Lucas had also brought a basin of warm water and clean towels. "Thought you might want to wash up," he said, then retreated, closing the door behind him. Josephine cleaned herself, and Clara as best she could, marveling at the simple pleasure of warm water and soap. By the time she climbed into the bed with Clara nestled beside her, she felt almost human again. The sheets were clean and smelled of sunshine, and the mattress was more comfortable than anything she had slept on in months. She meant to stay awake, to think about her situation and make plans, but exhaustion overwhelmed her. Within minutes, she was asleep. When she woke, pale light was filtering through the curtains. The wind had died down, though she could still hear it moaning softly outside. Clara was stirring, making the small grunting sounds that meant she would be demanding food soon. Josephine sat up carefully, checking the room. Someone had come in while she slept and stoked the fire. The room was comfortably warm. She tended to Clara, then ventured out into the main room. Lucas was at the stove, cooking something that smelled wonderful. He turned when he heard her. "Good morning. How are you feeling?" "Much better, thank you. I cannot remember the last time I slept so well." "You needed it. Storm let up about an hour ago. It is still snowing, but not as hard. Sit down. I made eggs and bacon and biscuits." Josephine sat at the simple wooden table, and Lucas served her a plate heaped with food. She ate slowly, savoring every bite. Lucas ate his own breakfast, watching her with those thoughtful eyes. "Tell me more about yourself," he said. "You said your husband died. How long ago?" 6 months. He took a fever and it carried him off in less than a week. We had a small farm in Missouri, but it was heavily mortgaged. When he died, the bank took everything. I was pregnant with Clara at the time. My sister sent me money to come to Texas. She said there was plenty of room and she could use the help. She is a widow too, with 3 children of her own. That is rough, Lucas said quietly, losing a husband and a home all at once. It has been difficult, Josephine admitted, but I am grateful to have somewhere to go, or I was until the storm. We will get you back on your way, Lucas assured her. Once the weather clears enough, I will take you into Muskogee. We can find out if your wagon train made it through, and we can send telegrams to your sister to let her know you are safe. You have already done so much, Josephine said. I hate to ask for more. You are not asking, I am offering. Besides, it is Christmas Day. Seems fitting to help someone in need. Josephine had completely forgotten. Christmas. I had hoped to give Clara her first Christmas somewhere special, not lost in a blizzard. Well, you are not lost anymore, Lucas said, and we can still make it a decent Christmas. I have a small tree I cut a few days ago. I was not planning to do much with it, but we could set it up. I might even have some ribbons somewhere. The thought of celebrating, even in a small way, lifted Josephine's spirits. That would be lovely. They spent the morning working together. Lucas brought in the tree, a small pine that he set up in the corner of the main room. Josephine found ribbon in a sewing basket and made simple bows to hang on the branches. Lucas carved a star from a piece of scrap wood and fixed it to the top. It was a humble tree, but it brought warmth and cheer to the room. Clara seemed fascinated by the tree, her eyes tracking the movement of the ribbons. Josephine held her close, rocking her gently while Lucas made dinner. He had a chicken that he roasted with potatoes and carrots, and he even produced a small cake that he admitted he had bought in town the week before, planning to have a quiet Christmas by himself. You have family nearby? Josephine asked as they ate. Lucas's expression darkened slightly. Not anymore. My parents died when I was young. Fever took them both the same winter. I was raised by my uncle, but he passed 3 years ago. He left me this ranch. It is a good spread, about 300 acres. I run cattle and some horses. Do well enough. It must be lonely, though. Sometimes, Lucas admitted, but I keep busy. The work is hard, especially in winter, but I like it. I like being my own man, making my own choices. You never married, came close once. Lucas pushed food around his plate. Girl I knew from town. We courted for about a year and I was planning to propose, but then she met a banker from Tulsa. He had more money, more prospects. She married him instead. I am sorry, Josephine said softly. Lucas shrugged. It was 5 years ago. I have moved on, just have not found the right woman since. Most of the women around here are either already married or looking for someone with bigger ambitions than ranching. Ranching is honest work, Josephine said. There is honor in it. I think so, Lucas said, meeting her eyes. But not everyone does. After dinner, they sat by the fire. Lucas produced a battered harmonica and played a few Christmas carols. He was not particularly skilled, but the music was cheerful and sweet. Josephine sang along softly, holding Clara, who had finally stopped fussing and seemed content. You have a pretty voice, Lucas said when he finished playing. My mother taught me, Josephine said. She loved to sing. She died when I was 15, childbirth. The baby died too. Seems like we have both had our share of loss, Lucas observed. Yes, but we are still here. That counts for something. It does. They were quiet for a while, watching the fire. Outside, the wind had picked up again and snow was falling heavily. Josephine felt a strange contentment despite everything. Here, in this simple house with this quiet man, she felt safer than she had in a very long time. The next day brought clear skies and bitter cold. The world outside was transformed. every surface covered in at least 2 feet of snow. Lucas bundled up and went out to tend his animals, and Josephine busied herself around the house. She found herself tidying and organizing, feeling the need to contribute in some way. She discovered that Lucas was a tidy man, but not a particularly organized one. His pantry was well stocked but chaotic. She spent an hour rearranging things, grouping like items together. She found his mending basket overflowing and settled down with needle and thread to repair shirts and socks while Clara napped. When Lucas came back inside, stamping snow from his boots, he stopped and stared. "Did you clean? I hope you do not mind. I needed something to do, and you have been so kind. It seemed the least I could offer." Lucas looked around the room, taking in the straightened shelves and the pile of mended clothes. "I do not mind at all, thank you. I am not much for housekeeping." "Most men are not," Josephine said with a smile, "but you keep things cleaner than my husband did." He could not be bothered to hang up his coat half the time. "I cannot abide mess when it comes to my own space," Lucas said. "The barn now, that is a different story, but the house should be comfortable." Over the next few days, they fell into an easy routine. Lucas handled the outdoor work while Josephine managed the house. She cooked meals that were more elaborate than Lucas's simple fare, using the well-stocked pantry to make stews and pies and biscuits that made the house smell like a home. Lucas chopped extra wood and kept all the fires burning bright. In the evenings, they sat together and talked. Josephine learned that Lucas had fought briefly in the last years of the Civil War, too young to see much action but old enough to be marked by what he saw. He had come to Oklahoma Territory with his uncle in 1878, when the land was just opening up to more white settlement, though it was still Indian territory and subject to tribal law in many areas. He respected his Creek and Cherokee neighbors, traded fairly with them, and had made friends among the freedmen who had come west seeking new opportunities. She told him about her own life, growing up in Ohio, marrying young to a man who seemed solid and dependable but turned out to be a dreamer with no head for business. She had loved him, but it had been a practical love, built on companionship more than passion. His death had grieved her, but it had also freed her from constant worry about debt and failure. "That sounds hard," Lucas said one evening as they sat by the fire. "Loving someone but always being afraid." It was. "I kept thinking things would get better, that he would figure it out, but he never did. Every scheme failed. Every investment went bad, and I just kept trying to hold things together." "You are strong," Lucas said. "Stronger than you probably know. Most women would have fallen apart, but you kept going. Even when you lost everything, you found a way forward." "I had to. For Clara. She deserves better than a mother who gives up." Lucas looked at the baby, who was sleeping peacefully in a makeshift cradle he had built from an old crate and some blankets. "She is lucky to have you." "I am the lucky one," Josephine said. "She is my whole world now." Something in Lucas's expression shifted, became more tender. "You are a good mother." The compliment warmed Josephine more than it probably should have. She realized she had been starved for kindness, for someone to see her as more than just a burden or a problem to be solved. A week after Josephine's arrival, the weather finally broke enough for travel. Lucas hitched up a sleigh and bundled Josephine and Clara in warm blankets for the journey to Muskogee. The trip took several hours, but the day was clear and bright, and Josephine found herself enjoying the ride despite the cold. Muskogee was larger than she had expected, a bustling town with multiple streets of businesses and homes. Lucas drove straight to the telegraph office, where Josephine composed a message to her sister explaining what had happened and asking for instructions. The telegrapher promised to send it immediately and to hold any reply for her. They checked with the marshal's office about the wagon train. The marshal, a weathered man named Tom Crawford, checked his records and confirmed that a wagon train matching Josephine's description had arrived just before Christmas, heavily delayed by the storm. They reported one wagon missing, Crawford said. Woman with a baby. They searched for a day but could not find any trace, figured she did not make it. They moved on 3 days ago. Did they leave any information about her destination? Lucas asked. Nothing in my notes. Sorry, madam. Josephine's heart sank. She had been hoping the wagon master might have recorded her sister's address, but apparently not. All she could do was wait for the telegram reply. They spent the rest of the day in town, purchasing supplies that Josephine would need, including proper diapers and clothing for Clara. Lucas insisted on paying for everything, waving off Josephine's protests. You can pay me back when you get settled, he said. For now, let me help. They returned to the ranch as the sun was setting, and Josephine felt a strange reluctance as the house came into view. She had been so focused on reaching her sister, on continuing her journey, but now that the way was clear, she found herself not wanting to leave. The feeling only grew stronger over the next few days. A telegram arrived from her sister, expressing relief that Josephine was alive and insisting that she come to Texas as soon as possible. But the message also included worrying news. Her sister's youngest child had taken ill with pneumonia, and money was tight. She could not send funds for travel, and she suggested that Josephine might want to wait until spring when travel would be easier and cheaper. Josephine read the telegram 3 times, trying to push down the mixture of relief and guilt she felt. She should want to press on to reach her family. But instead, she felt grateful for the reprieve. Lucas read her expression accurately. You are welcome to stay here as long as you need, he said. Spring is a better time to travel anyway, especially with a baby. I cannot impose on you for months, Josephine protested. It is not imposing if I am inviting you, Lucas said, and honestly I have gotten used to having you here. The house feels warmer with someone else in it, more like a home than just a place to sleep. Josephine felt her cheeks heat. I have felt the same way. You have been so kind, Lucas. I do not know what I would have done without you. You do not have to think about it, Lucas said. Just stay. Help around the house if it makes you feel better about it, but mostly just stay because I want you to. The honesty in his voice made Josephine's heart skip. She realized that somewhere in the past week and a half, she had stopped thinking of Lucas as just her rescuer. He had become something more, someone she looked forward to seeing each morning, someone whose smile made her day brighter. All right, she said softly. I will stay until spring. If you are certain. I am certain, Lucas said, and the warmth in his eyes made her feel things she had not felt in a very long time. Winter deepened, and the ranch became its own small world. The roads were often impassable, and they went days at a time without seeing another soul. But Josephine did not feel isolated. She felt cocooned, protected, as though the snow had created a safe space where only good things could happen. She and Lucas grew closer with each passing day. They worked side by side on household tasks, developed private jokes, shared their hopes and fears. Lucas taught her how to make soap and how to preserve meat. Josephine taught him how to make proper bread and how to darn socks so they would actually last. Clara was thriving, growing plump and happy. She smiled now and sometimes laughed, and both Lucas and Josephine competed to see who could make her giggle more. Lucas was surprisingly good with the baby, holding her gently and singing to her in a soft, off-key voice that made Josephine want to weep with tenderness. One evening in late January, a major storm rolled in. It was even worse than the Christmas blizzard, with wind that shook the house and snow that fell so thickly it was impossible to see the barn. Lucas came in from checking the animals looking like a snowman, ice crusted on his coat and hat. "That is brutal out there," he said, stamping his feet and shaking off snow. "Glad I got the animals secured. We could be stuck inside for a few days." Josephine helped him out of his coat and hung it by the fire to dry. "We have plenty of food, we will be fine." They made dinner together, a hearty stew that simmered for hours, filling the house with rich smells. After they ate, they played cards while Clara dozed in her cradle. The wind howled outside, but inside it was warm and peaceful. "I have been thinking," Lucas said, laying down a card. "When spring comes and you go to Texas, I am going to miss you something fierce." Josephine's hand stilled over her cards. "I will miss you too. So I was wondering." Lucas set down his cards and looked at her directly. "What if you did not go?" Josephine's breath caught. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if you stayed? Here, with me? Permanent-like." Lucas took a deep breath. "Josephine, I know we have not known each other long, but I have never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. You are smart and strong and kind, and you make this house feel like a home. I think about you all day when I am working, and I look forward to coming inside because I know you will be here. And I love Clara like she was my own. I would be honored to be her father, to raise her and give her a good life. So I guess what I am trying to say is, will you marry me?" Josephine felt tears spilling down her cheeks. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst. "Lucas, I feel the same way. I have been trying not to because I did not know if you could ever care for me that way, and I did not want to presume anything. But yes, I will marry you." Lucas was around the table in an instant, pulling her up and into his arms. He cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, and it was nothing like the chaste kisses she had shared with her first husband. This was fire and hunger and tenderness all mixed together. This was passion and promise. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "I will make you happy," Lucas said. "I swear it." "You already do," Josephine whispered. They kissed again, slower this time, learning each other. Lucas's hands were gentle as they moved over her back, holding her close but not demanding. Josephine felt desire uncurling in her belly, warm and insistent. It had been so long since she had been touched this way, since she had wanted to be touched. "I want you," she said against his mouth. "Is that wrong? We are not married yet." "We will be," Lucas said. "And no, it is not wrong. Not if we both want it." He led her to his bedroom, and they undressed each other slowly, learning the landscape of each other's bodies. Lucas was lean and muscled, marked with scars from years of hard work and harder living. Josephine was softer, her belly still loose from childbirth, but Lucas touched her like she was precious, like she was beautiful. They came together with urgency and tenderness, and it was everything Josephine had not known she was missing. With her husband, lovemaking had been quick and perfunctory, a duty to be performed. With Lucas, it was connection, communication, a conversation of bodies and breath. He made her feel things she had not known were possible, took her to heights she had not imagined, and when it was over she lay in his arms feeling complete for the first time in her life. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Lucas said, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret this." They married in early February, as soon as the weather cleared enough for them to get back to Muskogee. The ceremony was simple, held in the small church with only the minister and his wife as witnesses. Josephine wore a simple blue dress that Lucas had bought her, and Lucas wore his best suit, which was a bit threadbare but clean and pressed. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Lucas kissed her with such joy that the minister's wife dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. Afterward, they celebrated with dinner at the town's small restaurant, and then they returned home to the ranch. Their ranch, Josephine thought. Their home. Spring came slowly, melting the snow in increments. As the land emerged from winter, Lucas took Josephine around the property, showing her every corner of their 300 acres. The ranch was more beautiful than she had realized, with rolling hills and a creek that ran through the eastern section. There were pastures for the cattle, a large vegetable garden that had been neglected for years, and even a small orchard of apple trees. "We could make this into something really special," Lucas said as they stood overlooking the main pasture. "With two of us working, we could expand the herd, improve the house, maybe get some chickens and pigs." "I would like to fix up the garden," Josephine said, "and maybe plant more vegetables. We could sell the surplus in town." "That is a fine idea," Lucas said, pulling her close. "We are partners in this, Josephine. I want you to feel like this place is as much yours as mine." Clara was crawling now, getting into everything. They had to watch her constantly to keep her from pulling herself up on furniture or grabbing dangerous objects. But her curiosity and energy made them both laugh. She had Lucas wrapped completely around her tiny finger. He called her his little darling and carved her toys from wood in the evenings. In late April, Josephine realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but she waited until she was certain before telling Lucas. He was working in the barn when she went to find him, and she simply walked up and said, "We are going to have a baby." Lucas dropped the bucket he was holding. "You are sure?" "As sure as I can be." "I felt this way with Clara. The baby should come in December around Christmas." Lucas let out a whoop of joy and picked her up, spinning her around despite her laughing protests. "A baby, our baby, Josephine, this is the best news. Are you happy?" "So happy," she said, and she meant it. With her first pregnancy, she had been terrified and overwhelmed. Now, she felt only joy and anticipation. This child would be born into a stable home with two parents who loved each other and would love the baby fiercely. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Josephine felt healthier than she had during her pregnancy with Clara, probably because she was eating better and was not constantly stressed about money. Lucas was attentive and caring, taking over the heavier chores and insisting she rest whenever possible. Summer was busy on the ranch. They worked from dawn to dusk, tending the animals and the garden, making repairs to buildings and fences. Lucas hired a few hands to help with the cattle drive in July, and Josephine cooked for all of them, providing huge meals that the men devoured appreciatively. One of the hands, a young cowboy named Danny, asked Lucas if he was hiring permanent. Lucas talked it over with Josephine, and they agreed to bring Danny on full-time. Having an extra hand meant Lucas would not be so stretched thin, especially when the new baby arrived. Autumn brought harvest time. The garden had flourished under Josephine's care, producing far more vegetables than they could use. Josephine spent weeks canning and preserving, and they sold the surplus in Muskogee for good prices. The apple trees produced a bumper crop, and Josephine made apple butter and dried apples and applesauce. Clara was walking now, toddling around and chattering in her own language. She called Lucas Papa, which made him melt every time. She was curious about everything, and Josephine spent much of her time redirecting the toddler from dangerous activities. In November, they received a letter from Josephine's sister. She apologized for not writing sooner, explaining that her youngest had been seriously ill for months, but was finally recovering. She was glad to hear that Josephine had married and was doing well, and she invited them to visit when they could manage it. "We should go next summer," Lucas said after reading the letter. "All of us. I would like to meet your sister, and Clara should know her cousins." "That would be wonderful," Josephine said. I have missed her. December arrived with a mild winter, nothing like the brutal cold of the previous year. Josephine went into labor on the 15th, and Lucas rode like the devil to fetch the midwife from Muskogee. The labor was shorter than it had been with Clara, and by evening Josephine was holding a healthy baby boy. "He is perfect," Lucas said, his voice choked with emotion. He held his son with infinite care, studying the tiny face. "What should we name him?" "What about James, after your uncle?" Josephine suggested. "He gave you so much, it seems right to honor him." "James Quinn," Lucas said. "I like it, Jamie for short." Little Jamie was an easy baby, nursing well and sleeping in long stretches. Clara was fascinated by her baby brother, constantly wanting to touch him and help with his care. They had to watch her carefully to make sure she was not too enthusiastic in her affection. Christmas that year was joyful and full. They invited Danny to share dinner with them, and Josephine cooked a feast. The house was warm and bright, filled with laughter and love. As Josephine sat by the fire that evening, watching Lucas play with Clara while Jamie slept in her arms, she thought about how much had changed in just 1 year. A year ago, she had been dying in the snow, certain that she and her baby would perish. Now she was surrounded by warmth and love, with a husband who adored her and 2 beautiful children. It seemed like a miracle. "What are you thinking about?" Lucas asked, coming to sit beside her. "About how lucky I am," Josephine said. "About how you saved my life in more ways than one." "You saved mine too," Lucas said seriously. "I was just existing before you came along. Now I am living. There is a difference." He kissed her softly, and Josephine felt the familiar warmth of desire kindle in her belly. Even after more than a year together, she still wanted him, still thrilled to his touch. The years that followed were good ones. The ranch prospered under their joint management. Lucas expanded the herd and improved the breeding stock, while Josephine turned the garden into a profitable enterprise. They became known in the area for their quality cattle and their excellent produce. Clara grew into a bright, energetic child who loved helping her father with the animals. Jamie was quieter, more thoughtful, but he had his father's gentle strength. In 1884, Josephine gave birth to a daughter they named Margaret, after her mother. Maggie was a happy baby who became a sweet-natured toddler. They made the trip to Texas in the summer of 1885, spending 2 weeks with Josephine's sister and her family. It was wonderful to reconnect, to let the children meet their cousins. Josephine's sister was thriving, and she was happy to see Josephine so settled and content. In 1887, another son arrived whom they named William. Billy was a robust baby who seemed to come out of the womb ready to take on the world. He kept them all busy with his boundless energy. Oklahoma territory was changing rapidly. More settlers were arriving every year, and there was increasing pressure to open more land to white settlement. Lucas and Josephine watched the changes with mixed feelings. They were glad to see the area growing, but they worried about what it would mean for their Creek and Cherokee neighbors, who were seeing their territory shrink year by year. In 1889, the government opened up additional land for settlement in what was called the Land Run. Thousands of people flooded into the territory, claiming homesteads. Muskogee continued to grow, becoming more established and prosperous. Through it all, Lucas and Josephine's love remained strong. They had their disagreements, as any couple did, but they worked through them with respect and communication. They made all major decisions together, each valuing the other's opinion. Lucas was a devoted father, spending hours with his children, teaching them about ranching and life. He taught Clara to ride when she was 6, and she proved to be a natural horsewoman. He read to Jamie every night, fostering the boy's love of books. He built Maggie a dollhouse with such care and detail that she treasured it all her life. And he wrestled with Billy, channeling the boy's energy into useful work around the ranch. Josephine was the heart of the family, the one who held everything together. She kept the house running smoothly, managed the family finances, cared for the children, and still found time to maintain her garden and preserve their harvest. She was also active in the church and in town, helping organize charitable efforts and supporting her neighbors in times of need. In 1891, when Clara was 10 and Jamie was 9, Josephine had her fifth and final child, another boy they named Henry. Harry was a surprise, as Josephine had thought she was done having children, but he was a welcome one. He was a quiet baby who seemed content to watch the chaos of the household swirl around him. By the mid-1890s, the Quinn Ranch was one of the most successful in the area. They had expanded to 500 acres, had a substantial herd of cattle, and employed 3 permanent hands. The house had been enlarged and improved, with an addition that included 2 more bedrooms and a proper parlor. Clara was growing into a lovely young woman, with her mother's determination and her father's kindness. She talked about becoming a teacher, and Lucas and Josephine encouraged her ambitions, determined that their daughter would have opportunities they had not had. Jamie showed an aptitude for business and numbers, and Lucas began training him in the ranch management side of things. Maggie was the family's artist, always drawing or painting, and they encouraged her creativity. Billy was pure cowboy, happiest when he was working with the cattle or horses. And Harry was still too young to show his inclinations, but he was a bright, observant child. In 1898, Josephine's sister died of influenza. It hit Josephine hard, and Lucas held her through the grief, just as she had held him when his last remaining distant relatives had died. They went to Texas for the funeral, bringing all the children. Josephine's nieces and nephews were all grown now, starting their own families, and there was comfort in seeing that her sister's legacy would continue. As the new century approached, Lucas and Josephine sometimes sat on their porch in the evenings, watching the sunset and reflecting on the life they had built together. "Do you ever think about that night I found you?" Lucas asked one evening in the summer of 1899. "All the time," Josephine said. "I think about how close we came to dying, Clara and me, and I think about how finding you was like finding home. I had been lost for so long, Lucas. Not just that night in the storm, but for years before that. And then you found me and everything made sense." "I felt the same way," Lucas said. "Like I had been waiting for you without even knowing it. That night when I heard your voice from that ravine, it was like something in me recognized something in you. I knew, even before I saw your face, that you were going to be important to me." "We have been blessed," Josephine said. "So much could have gone wrong, but instead, everything went right." "Not everything," Lucas said. "We have had our hard times, lost 2 babies before they were born, remember? Had that bad year when half the herd took sick. There was the drought summer and the winter when the barn roof collapsed. But we faced all of it together," Josephine said. "That is what made the difference. We were partners through all of it." "Still are," Lucas said, taking her hand. "Always will be." In 1900, Clara married a young man named Robert, a teacher from Muskogee. It was a beautiful wedding, held at the ranch with half the county in attendance. Josephine cried happy tears as she watched her eldest daughter pledge her life to a good man who clearly adored her. Jamie left for college the same year, heading east to study business. It was hard to let him go, but Lucas and Josephine were proud of his ambition. They knew he would come back, and he did, returning 2 years later with a degree and a head full of ideas for expanding the ranch's operations. The 20th century brought changes and challenges. Oklahoma became a state in 1907, and the transition brought new laws and regulations. Lucas and Josephine adapted as they always had, finding ways to thrive in the changing landscape. Maggie married a journalist and moved to Oklahoma City, where she continued her painting and became known in the local art scene. Billy took over much of the day-to-day running of the ranch, proving to be as capable as his father. Harry went to veterinary school and came back to set up a practice in Muskogee, serving the ranchers and farmers of the area. Clara and Robert gave Lucas and Josephine their first grandchild in 1902, a boy they named Lucas after his grandfather. More grandchildren followed in steady succession over the years, and the ranch house was often filled with the laughter of children. In 1915, Lucas and Josephine celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary. Their children threw them a large party with friends and family coming from across the state. As Josephine stood beside Lucas, surrounded by their children and grandchildren, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. "Thank you," she said to Lucas when they had a quiet moment alone. "For what?" "For everything. For saving my life that night, for loving me, for being the most wonderful husband and father, for building this life with me." Lucas pulled her close, and even after 3 decades she still felt that spark, that connection. "Thank you for saying yes when I asked you to stay. Thank you for loving me back. Thank you for every day we have had together." They danced together at the party, moving slowly to music played by a small band Jamie had hired. Josephine rested her head on Lucas's shoulder and thought about how far they had come. From a desperate woman and her baby freezing to death in a blizzard to this moment, surrounded by love and family and joy. The years continued to pass. Lucas and Josephine grew older, their hair turning silver, their bodies showing the wear of decades of hard work. But their love never diminished. If anything, it grew stronger, deepened by shared experience and unwavering commitment. In 1925, they celebrated their 40th anniversary. Billy and his wife had taken over the main operations of the ranch, living in the big house with their children while Lucas and Josephine had moved into a smaller cottage on the property. They still helped out when they could, but mostly they enjoyed a quieter life, tending their garden and spending time with grandchildren and great-grandchildren. "We did good, didn't we?" Lucas said one evening as they sat on the porch of their cottage, watching the sun set over land that had been theirs for nearly 50 years. "We did wonderful," Josephine said. "Better than I ever dreamed possible." "You know what I think about sometimes," Lucas said. "I think about what would have happened if I had gone a different direction that day. If I had gone north instead of south, or stayed at the ranch instead of going out to look for strays. You and Clara would have died, and I would never have known. I would have lived my whole life alone, never knowing what I was missing." "But you did not go a different direction," Josephine said firmly. "You went exactly where you needed to go. Maybe it was fate, maybe it was God, maybe it was just luck. But it happened and we found each other, and that is all that matters." "You are right," Lucas said. He leaned over and kissed her, and it still made her heart flutter even after all these years. "I love you, Josephine Quinn. I love you too, Lucas Quinn, forever and always." They sat together in comfortable silence, holding hands as the stars came out. Somewhere in the big house, they could hear their grandchildren playing. From the barn came the sound of cattle settling for the night. The wind rustled through the prairie grass, carrying the scent of summer. This was home. This was love. This was the life they had built together, brick by brick, day by day, from that terrifying night in December 1881 when a desperate woman and a lonely man had been brought together by a blizzard and fate, and it was perfect. Lucas lived to be 78, passing peacefully in his sleep in 1929. Josephine was devastated by his loss, but she found comfort in their children and grandchildren, and in the knowledge that she had been truly, deeply loved. She lived another 6 years, spending her final days surrounded by family, telling stories about their life together to anyone who would listen. When she died in 1935, she was buried beside Lucas in the family cemetery on the ranch, under the shade of the oak trees they had planted together 50 years earlier. Their graves were marked with simple stones that read, Lucas Quinn, 1851–1929, beloved husband and father Josephine Zimmerman Quinn, 1856–1935, beloved wife and mother, but the real monument to their love was not in stone. It was in the thriving ranch that their children and grandchildren continued to run. It was in the family that spread across Oklahoma and beyond, all of them carrying forward the values of hard work, integrity, and devotion that Lucas and Josephine had instilled. It was in the stories that were told and retold, of the Christmas blizzard and the cowboy who found a freezing woman and her baby, and gave them not just shelter but a home and a family and a love that lasted a lifetime. It was a legacy that would endure long after the stones had weathered and crumbled, a testament to the power of love to transform lives and create something beautiful and lasting from the most desperate of circumstances. And somewhere in whatever comes after, Lucas and Josephine were together again, holding hands and smiling, knowing that they had lived well and loved fully, and that their story would never truly end.